CBS Sports.
High drive, center field, hit the wall, grand slam. This is magnificent.
Got a fantasy question? Email fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. Get ready to win your league.
Where fantasy becomes reality.
Now here's Frank, Scott, Chris, and Adam.
Hey there, we're coming off a big weekend. The Scott White Dynasty League salary cap draft is in the books. Spring training has begun. And apparently I started the Saturday mailbag by saying the date was September 27th. It's only March, and I'm already losing my mind. Welcome to Fantasy Baseball today, and welcome to part 3 of our starting pitcher preview for 2021. Calling a little audible here, as we were originally supposed to do our relief pitcher preview today, but seeing as how we have so many starting pitchers left to talk about, we didn't want to gyp you guys. We want to give you guys the full experience for starting pitchers. So we're going to talk about hopefully like 40 more starting pitchers today, and I think that would pretty much put a bow on the starting pitcher position. Frank Stanfield, joined as always by Scott White and Chris Towers. How was the weekend, guys? Big weekend.
We're going to, by the end of starting pitcher preview part 3, we're going to have talked about like 45, maybe 47 players. So yeah, very excited about it.
How much you want to bet tomorrow's podcast is starting pitcher
part 4? It's been good discussions. So I hope the people are enjoying it. I could do 20 starting pitcher previews.
I could do 100.
I love it.
We might have
one per pitcher.
What's up, Scott? How was your weekend?
There are 20 good pitchers.
Yeah, that's, well, barely. But
Scott, my weekend was fine, Frank. How was your weekend? How was your first experience in this with the Scott White Dynasty League?
Not very good, and it wasn't, because of you or the way the league is set up. Just, spending $48 on David Price is never really a good thing.
It's a 24-team Dynasty League, so nobody feels good about the draft.
Yeah,
and obviously
comes out of the draft thinking, man, I got some real values there.
And obviously, all these bargain players being kept at lower salaries creates for massive inflation in the free agent market, because only a tiny percentage of the player pool is available. And anyone worth a darn gets paid a lot.
Really looking forward, Frank. Really looking forward to my keeper decision on my $81 Mike Trout for next season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chris, the big spender, went up and got Mike Trout. So starting pitchers in this league, they go for a lot of money. Corey Kluber went for like $50. Dallas Keuchel went for 45. So I figured I'd jump in and get the old David Price, who we'll talk about at some point today. But part 3, more ADP. We'll hit on some prospects towards the end of this podcast as well. But let's jump right in. We left off right around rounds 11 and 12. And those pitchers that we left off on were Sixto Sanchez at pick 128, Joe Musgrove, my boy, at pick 132, and Pablo Lopez at pick 137. 2 of these 3 pitchers are actually in my breakout column, Breakouts 2.0, which you can find over on the site. The only one that is not is Sixto Sanchez, who, Chris,
unbelievable. What a hater.
Who you have as a breakout. So tell us why.
Yeah, he's an interesting case because I think the most likely outcome, and I keep comparing pitchers to this guy, but like he's very Kyle Hendricksy. He throws 12 miles per hour harder than Kyle Hendricks. But, Sixto Sanchez, in the brief time that we saw him in the majors, was not a great strikeout pitcher. And, based on the minor league track record, that's to be expected. But he had really good control. And as I've talked about with a lot of other pitchers, he did a really good job of limiting quality of contact. And in his case, that very much was a thing in his minor league career. Never posted the kind of strikeout rates you want to see from a guy who's as touted as he is and who has as good stuff that he does, 7.9 per 9, but 1.7 walks per 9 in the minors, 0.2 home runs per 9 in the minors. He gave up 9 home runs in 335 innings and only 7.5 hits per 9. Now, obviously, I don't think he's going to only allow 7.5 hits per 9 in the majors. He'll give up more than 0.2 home runs per 9, probably walk more than 1.7 per 9. But all of those things that he did in the minors, he did in the majors. He is, I think, a relatively safe pitcher who does, I think, obviously have upside if he figures something out with his, I don't know if it's the pitch mix or the fastball location. But, there is the potential for him to turn into a Jose Barrios-esque strikeout pitcher, maybe closer to 1 per 9 than what he's been or what Kyle Hendricks has been. In which case, I think the profile takes another step forward. But even if he doesn't, I don't think you're going to be disappointed in Sixto.
I think you might be shortchanging the upside there.
Sure, I mean,
he's not far off from Jose Barrios' strikeout potential now.
Yeah, the raw stuff just seems like it should get so many more strikeouts than it does. So
yeah, I mean, I think Sixto Sanchez has shown he's perfectly fine as he is. Elite strike thrower, great ground balls. I mean, those are 2 of the 3 legs of the FIP triangle, right? And if he figures out how to strike guys out with that raw stuff, he's got plenty of time to do it. He's only 21, I think, 22.
Yeah, 22.
And you're talking about a real stud potentially.
Yeah, and the changeup I think was better than expected as a rookie. That was his actually most used pitch, followed by the sinker and 4-seamer. So he could be someone who gets the changeup usage to 30% from 27 or 33%. Gets the slider usage up to like 20 to 25%. And all of a sudden, the better swing and miss pitches are a bigger part of his repertoire. And, I think it could be a really good profile.
Again, that is Sixto Sanchez going off the board at pick 128, according to Fantasy Pros ADP. The other 2 names that I mentioned that are going within 9 picks of Sixto Sanchez are Joe Musgrove and Pablo Lopez. It's like a running joke at this point how much we talk about Joe Musgrove, someone who has a career ERA over 4, but just continues to tantalize us at the end of seasons with these awesome runs. And it was his final 5 starts last year for Musgrove, 2.16 ERA, a 13.7 K per 9, has been traded from the Pittsburgh Pirates over to the San Diego Padres. So he'll face some tougher competition, but we'll have a pretty damn good defense behind him and good run support as well. That's for Joe Musgrove. And Pablo Lopez, another pitcher for the Miami Marlins here, who was very good in his own right last year and made some pitch mix changes, used his curveball a lot less. He used a new cutter that we never saw before. And his changeup, I remember making this comparison last year, Scott, that Pablo Lopez's changeup was kind of like a Luis Castillo light. It's a really, really, really good changeup, and he throws it about 30% of the time. So I like Pablo Lopez. I like Musgrove. I like Sixto Sanchez a little bit less than some of these other guys, but I like all of them.
Yeah.
So what do you think about Musgrove and Pablo Lopez?
I see limits to Lopez's ceiling. I wish the whiff rate was higher. He's pretty good, but I don't think he gets much better from here. I'm actually as excited about Musgrove as I've ever been because that 14.4% swinging strike rate he had last year would have been in the top 10 if he qualified. It was the same as Darvish. His last 2 starts to end the season were both double-digit strikeout efforts. He had never had one of those before ever, and he had back-to-back to end the season. He changed his pitch mix. He just looked like a different pitcher after coming off a triceps injury early on, and now he has a great supporting cast, something he hasn't had in a long time either. Guy who pitches deep into games, so could have a lot of win potential. I have Joe Musgrove as a breakout this season too, and I think I rank Lopez higher because Lopez feels pretty safe, but I'm more excited to draft Musgrove.
Musgrove has dealt with a lot of injuries so far in the past. Pay attention to the velocity throughout the spring, too, because whenever his fastball is around 93, 94, that's where you really see Joe Musgrove excel. I think at the start of last season, it was like 91, 92. So pay attention to that in the spring for him. Chris, I'll just ask you this question for the Marlins starting pitchers in general. Any concern over them because they're in a loaded division where they're going to have to face every other lineup outside of the Marlins? So, I mean, between the Braves, the Mets, the Phillies, of course, they'll face other teams as well, but those are some pretty tough offenses.
I mean, that's already baked into their numbers from 2020 more than it will affect them in 2021. I think if you're worried about them, it's more just the fact that they're both young and have limited track records of racking up big innings. I think both of those guys probably have pretty hard ceilings. And, I'm not sure what the Marlins are going to do with their rotation because they don't really have anybody that you could safely project for 150 innings. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how they manage that and whether they go with a 6-man rotation. They do have enough arms for that. But I think the concern is more about the workload than anything else there. And as for Musgrove, I mean, when you're only good in September and the season starts in late July, your season numbers are going to look pretty good. And his didn't look that good. I mean, I don't know.
Triceps issue.
I'm kind of surprised that he only has a 4.33 career ERA. He feels, it feels like he's been a little worse than that in his career. I don't know. Like those last 2 starts, they were really good. The Cardinals and Cleveland had 3 players with an OPS over 800 between their 2 lineups. So
that's a good point.
I just I can see it happening, sure, but I don't think what we saw in 2020 makes it worth pushing him up the draft board 70 or 80 spots, which is what's happened in the last year. I know all pitching is getting pushed up the board, but even relative to that, he wasn't, the number 41 SP last year. So I can definitely see it happening. I've always liked Joe Musgrove. I'm not willing to pay a premium to find out if this is the year it's finally going to happen for more than a month.
Yeah, the Musgrove ADP last season was 205, and now, as I mentioned, it is all the way up at 132. So I
didn't like him last year. That's why everybody's just following my lead here.
I agree that the price is high. I just feel like the year that I don't draft Joe Musgrove is the year he's going to be like a top 20 starting pitcher for fantasy.
I mean, he is, 27.
Guys, we've talked about 3 pitchers. We're 12 minutes in. Let's move on from Joe Musgrove, please.
He's 28. He's 28 years old, so it's I don't know. It's fine.
Scott, you're going to be my my reminder for actually do my job throughout the course of this podcast. We're into rounds 12 and 13 now. Kevin Gausman at pick 139, Sandy Alcantara at pick 147, and Marco Gonzalez at pick 151. Scott, I think a lot of people are pushing Gausman up the draft board to this point because really interesting numbers last year: 3.62 ERA, 1.11 WHIP, and a 15% swinging strike rate that would have ranked 7th among starting pitchers had he qualified.
Yeah, and I think Kevin Gausman, Joe Musgrove, and Zach Plesac, they're all emblematic. I'm not sure that's the right word. They're all representative of maybe a difference Chris and I have in our approach to starting pitcher. Because I think what those 3 pitchers showed us in the very short 2020, obviously in a small sample size, is that they are capable of emulating what a difference-making starting pitcher is. I don't know if it's real either, but at least somebody showed they could do it for, a 2-month season. And that's when we're beyond the point where I can for sure get that from a starting pitcher anyway. I'd rather take the shot on somebody who's shown he can maybe do it. And Gausman was somebody else like that last year. Never had even a strikeout per inning before. It jumped to 12 per 9 last year. Had pretty short outings early on. He was kind of eased in because of an elbow issue, but he started going 6 innings in September, 6 innings at a time. And I think he had 3 6-inning starts. Still a great splitter. That's always been a good swing and miss pitch. He actually threw his fastball less last year, which and emphasized that splitter more. It seemed to make the fastball more effective itself. It's hard for me to look into the numbers on Gausman and see, okay, that's why. That's what he did differently. That's why he made such a big difference. It kind of reminds me of Lance Lynn 2 years ago. Another guy who reminds me of Lance Lynn 2 years ago, right? Where it's maybe that change in fastball usage, just that subtle difference helped every pitch play up, and we saw him explode like we did. I don't know. It seems worth taking a chance on Gausman at the price as my 5th starter, 6th starter. Something I like doing.
I will say on Gausman and just pitchers that rely so heavily on their splitter, I think he threw it over 40% of the time last year. He threw the splitter, I Actually, Fangraph says 28.5%, but I think I saw on Baseball Savant that it's over 40. These pitch mix percentages are always kind of all over the place depending on where you look. But someone that relies so heavily on the splitter, I just worry about the consistency year over year. It just seems like some years they have their splitter and some years they don't. So I worry about Gausman a little bit. He's been very inconsistent in his career. We've seen some flashes, never like this, but I worry a little bit about him. Sandy Alcantara and Marco Gonzalez seem like they are points league specialists. They're, both very good in that format. Chris, would you like to add anything on those two gentlemen?
Marco Gonzalez is very boring, and nobody ever really wants to draft him. This is the highest his draft cost has ever been, and it makes me slightly less likely to draft him, just because he was always someone you could get very, very late, who has been consistently pretty good. An ERA of 3.88 or below in each of his 3 major league seasons. I think he's fine. I was looking at the wrong. Sandy Alcantara has an ERA of 3.88 or below in each of his 3 major league seasons. Mark Gonzalez, it's similar. I don't know what the exact numbers are. I'm sorry. But I think Gonzalez is a perfectly servable guy to have on your team. And when he falls past this point is when I think it makes sense to draft him. But you're never going to be thrilled that he's on your team. You're probably never going to feel too bad about it either.
So for Sandy Alcantara, you mentioned, Chris, since 2018, he has a 3.69 ERA and a 1.31 whip. That's 45 starts during that time. He goes pretty deep into his starts. He went 6+ in 6 of 7 starts. So super small sample size from last year because they had a bunch of COVID related things happening with the Marlins, obviously. Sandy Alcantara kind of reminds me of Kyle Hendricks. I mean, we keep making the comp, but just with more walks, I think that is pretty good for him.
Yeah, I think he's just incredibly hard to square up. And over the last couple of seasons, he's gotten his walk rate down from, completely unmanageable to merely bad. And I think if he keeps it in that 8 to 9% range, Sandy Alcantara will continue to be a pretty effective pitcher. And the Marlins have no problem letting him go deep into games in those starts where he's racking up a ton of weak contact. And he might be the one guy on the team who could reasonably throw 160 innings.
Just on Marco Gonzalez, he has 30.
4 ERA for Marco Gonzalez over the last 3 seasons, 4 or below.
Yeah. His calling card has been wins, even though he's on a terrible Mariners team. 36 wins since the start of 2018. That's tied for 3rd among starting pitchers. Why is that? It's because Marco Gonzalez consistently goes deep into starts. He barely walks anyone. He had 7 walks all of last season. So going deep definitely helps with wins. And obviously in a points league, he was the 8th best starting pitcher in terms of fantasy points per game last year. Again, that is Marco Gonzalez. Just outside the top 160 picks in ADP, we see Mike Soroka at pick 161, Frankie Montas at pick 162, and German Marquez at pick 160. I wrote 162 again. See, I'm just losing my mind. Let's see where Marquez is actually going.
164.4.
Yeah, so 2 picks after Frankie Montas. They're all going within 5 picks of each other, basically. Soroka is returning from a torn Achilles that he suffered in August, Scott, and there was a report that came out just last week that he will not be back until the end of April. So how does that affect your ability to draft him in this range, in around the 160 ADP range?
Well, I mean, I would imagine his ADP's gone down since that news. It was never for sure he was going to be ready for opening day, but that pretty much ruled it out. And, there's questions as to how effective he's going to be when he gets back. Obviously, how deep the Braves will let him pitch into games. And wasn't an open and shut case how good he was to begin with. I happen to think he's pretty good. I happen to think he's Sixto Sanchez-like in terms of result, if not in terms of stuff. But highly unproven still. So while I think he's somebody worth drafting and stashing away for that first month, this seems like a high price to pay for that. I'd rather have Frankie Montas, who, this time a year ago, we were considering a borderline ace. He had some issues last year, but finished strong. And German Marquez maybe too, though. Like German Marquez is always a tough one for me to draft because I've invested a lot in my pitching staff already, and like you just know he's going to hurt your ERA. So why would you, if you've already made a big investment in pitching staff, why would you take somebody who you know is going to have a hard time keeping that ERA under 4? The innings should be good, the strikeouts should be good, but pitching for the Rockies, obviously Marquez is at a disadvantage.
That's the thing, though. The Rockies are rebuilding. They already traded Arenado. If Marquez does get traded, I mean, where would you rank Marquez if he pitched for like a completely neutral team, like let's say the Nationals, like neutral park, neutral team context? He might be like a top 25 starting pitcher, right?
My first instinct was to say top 30, but I think that's a fair range, right? Probably around Wheeler and Jose Barrios.
I think he'd be better than those guys on a per inning basis, and I'm not sure they're necessarily safer. Like he's missed very few starts over the last 4 seasons. He made 29, 33, 28, and 13. He might be a top 25 starter.
I think it's hard to say how good a Rockies pitcher could be outside of Coors because his pitches would play differently on top of everything else.
Yep.
It could only help, obviously, but it could help even beyond what we're imagining. It's a big if him getting traded, though. I mean, he's cost controlled I think he's actually signed to a long-term deal. So, big if, but it's possible.
3 more years, 2 more years after this one with a team option. So, but yeah, he has a 3.51 career ERA on the road.
Yeah, that's 5.10 at home in Coors Field. So, yeah, I think I've never drafted German Marquez. I'm probably more likely to do it this year than ever before. He actually goes deep into his starts, 6+ in 10 of 13 starts. And he had one dreadful start at home where he allowed 10 earned runs against the Astros. If you take that start away, this is like slippery slope analysis. I realize that. But you take that start away, he had a 2.83 ERA in his other 12 starts. So I think
I just hate that the strikeouts have fallen the past 2 years. That's part of it too. Like, can't even count on him for a strikeout per inning. It's hard to swallow the ERA too.
Chris, any thoughts on Frankie Montas? He is going 60 picks later than he was this time last year, and it was a really weird season for him in 2020, following the PED suspension that he had in 2019. First 4 starts, 1.57 ERA. He suffered a back injury. He got scratched from a start. His next 6, he had a 10.88 ERA over a 6-start stretch. And then his final start, 6 innings, 2 runs, 13 strikeouts against the Mariners. So with all that, where are we at now with Montas?
Yeah, and I think the velocity went down. It peaked back up towards the end of the season. So, I think that's something where you can look at the injury. He's still got, I guess I kind of look at it like, why would I draft Kevin Gausman if I can get Frankie Montas, 30 picks later, however much it is? I think that makes a little more sense. I think they're similar pitchers. They're both very dependent on one outlier pitch, which is the splitter in both cases, but Montas, didn't really throw it all that much last season. So I think there's room for him to improve on that as well.
Yeah, and he has a few other pitches he can rely on. He has a slider, which is decent. He has a 4-seam fastball and a sinker that he uses, 2 different fastballs. So
yeah, the splitter is the strikeout pitch. If he has the splitter going and he's throwing it like 25% of the time, he can be a K+ per inning guy.
Scott's laughing over there. What are you laughing at, Scott?
You guys are stressing me out. You guys are stressing me out. We're taking too long to talk about everybody.
All right. So let's keep moving then. Scott, you're right. Look, keep me in check.
If I start rubbing my forehead like this, that's what that means.
Okay. All right. I'll pay attention. Round 14, we have 3 more names. Dustin May at pick 165, Corey Kluber at pick 166, and David Price, my man, David Price at pick 168. Corey Kluber, let's just talk about this rise in ADP because it's getting pretty crazy. His ADP back in December, I was doing some NFBC drafts. His ADP was outside the top 250. The man is now up to pick 166. Is this really all Yankee driven? Because he has more run support, but he pitches in a worse park now. And he has to go to Camden, and he has to go to Fenway, and he has to go to Dunedin, which apparently is a better hitter's park than Buffalo. And Corey Kluber is turning 35 on April 10th, and he's pitched 36 and 2/3 innings over the past 2 seasons. I have no idea what's going on, Scott, and I really don't want to get involved.
I mean, I don't really care about any of the division park factor stuff. Like either Corey Kluber still got it or he doesn't. And I think this is an appropriate place to gamble on him potentially still having it. I mean, it's not like we've seen him drop off. Yes, he had that one rough April 2 years ago when like half the aces in the league had a terrible April because there were a lot of extenuating circumstances there. And then he got hurt and he missed the whole year. He basically missed all of last year. And we really don't know what we're getting into with Corey Kluber, but we know the last time we saw him for an extended period of time, he was still contending for a Cy Young award and has a long history of doing that. Clearly the Yankees are, hoping they bought low on him. And I think this is an appropriate buy low point in the draft too. Like I've been saying with most of these pitchers. I mean, the only guys who really matter anymore are the ones who can at least look like an ace most of the time. And Corey Kluber, I mean, he would seem to fit the bill if he's right. If he's not, you drop him, you move on. I think this is a fine point to take that gamble, though.
It's a total unknown. I was making the case for him last year, and then he missed most of the season with a shoulder injury. That's where I get more skeptical. But I agree, the risk is relatively low. The price is fine. I would rather have Price.
Let's talk about the two Dodgers in this range, Dustin May and David Price, on two completely different ends of the spectrum. Dustin May is young and he's exciting. Is he though? I mean, 8.5% career swinging strike rate, pitches lots of contact. So I think he's fun to watch, Dustin May, but I mean, in terms of how fantasy relevant he is, I think he's overrated quite a bit. David Price, another older pitcher, 35 years old, did not pitch last season because he opted out with the COVID season there. Last time we saw David Price was back in 2019, 4.28 ERA, 1.31 WHIP. Those surface numbers are not very good, but 10.7 K per nine was a career high, and his swinging strike rate was over 11%.
The numbers were better than he pitched better than his final numbers because
he had a blow up against the Yankees.
Well, he had 2 starts where he only went 2 innings total between them. One, he got thrown out of the game, I think, for throwing at the Astros, maybe. I don't know. He only pitched 0.2 innings, but he threw 15 pitches, and it wasn't like he was getting hit hard. Then he had a blow-up game against the Rangers where he only threw 1 1/3 as well. Through July 14th, he made 17 starts with a 3.16 ERA. With only a 3.10 BABIP, so it wasn't really luck driven. And then over his last 6 starts, he allowed 20 runs in 22 innings or something like that. But he was dealing with a cyst in his wrist that basically ended his season. And he started complaining about it right around where that 17th start happened. So, we haven't seen him pitch since then. But it wasn't a structural issue. It was, not a muscular thing or a bone thing. I think if he can get back to, if he's healthy, I think he's probably going to be pretty good.
Again, that is David Price, who has an ADP at 168. And thankfully, he doesn't have to face the Yankees anymore because this guy, a 5.04 ERA in his career against them, that's 259 innings. So pretty big sample size of David Price stinking up the joint against the New York Yankees. Just outside the top 170 picks, we see Chris Bassett at pick 171, Tristan McKenzie at 173, and Dallas Keuchel at 177. Scott, I think we were talking off the air last week where you mentioned Chris Bassett is one of your more obvious busts this season.
Yeah, I think people just look at obviously he was an impactful pitcher in fantasy last year. You just look at the fact he went 5-2, had a 2.29 ERA, but Bassett was one of the biggest ERA overachievers of any pitcher last year. And that's true whether you look at xERA or what I prefer xFIP compared to that 2.29 ERA that he had. He had a 4.49 xFIP. Not a great strikeout pitcher. Not a big ground ball pitcher, just kind of average as far as that goes. not even really like a standout control pitcher, Chris Bassett. So like
doesn't go deep into games.
Yeah. Well, he started to a little later into last year, but there's certainly not a history of that.
Yeah,
I think he could probably keep the ERA under 4 just because he pitches in a big ballpark, and we have seen him do that before last year. But he's not going to be contending for an ERA title, and because he's a non-strikeout pitcher, an ERA around 4, it's really not worth that much. I mean, there are much more exciting pitchers going after Chris Bassett.
It's pretty Mike Fiersy.
I will just say regarding Bassett, he has this Marco Estrada thing going on. This is always the example I use. Marco Estrada for years found ways to be fantasy relevant when his xFIP and his FIP and his Sierra were all much higher than his ERA. So he would just always find a way to outperform his peripheral numbers. Say what you want about Bassett, 4.59 career xFIP, but 3.59 ERA. So he finds a way to get it done. Maybe it's because he pitches in the ballpark in Oakland.
He'll probably be a borderline fantasy contributor, but it's just like way too high for that.
And it's
I just settle for that,
It's sort of similar to Marco Estrada. Like he does get a decent amount of infield fly balls. Marco Estrada was an extreme fly ball pitcher who had a 15% infield fly ball rate. Bassett, more of an average across the board batted ball rate, 36% compared to 49% for Estrada. He does have a 13% infield fly ball rate, but I don't think that helps explain it all. I think there has been a good deal of luck for him, whereas I do think Marco Estrada, there was some skill there.
Chris, I believe you had Tristan McKenzie as either your sleeper or breakout for part 1 of our starting pitcher preview.
All the way back then.
So remind people quickly why you like him.
He's got the pedigree. He's got good minor league numbers, and he was really good in his first taste of the majors, despite going 357 days. No, whatever that plus 365 is, he went almost 2 years without making a start in a competitive game. So, I think you look at what he did in the majors after that time off. I'm not sure he'll be in the opening day rotation, but he should get his opportunity before long. Pitchers always do. Not every pitcher stays effective or healthy. Someone's going to falter for Cleveland, and he'll get a chance, and I think he'll be very good when he does.
Yeah, Tristan McKenzie, I really like the skills. He suppressed hard contact just 28% of the time, and he had a 12.4% swinging strike rate. So some interesting skills there from Tristan McKenzie. Last season, Dallas Keuchel, the ADP 177. I don't think anyone's really excited to draft Dallas Keuchel, Scott, but he's kind of like Marco Gonzalez-y with more walks.
Yeah, I mean, he kept the ERA way down last year, but I don't think anybody's counting on an ERA that low over a larger sample. I do like him more than like Chris Bassett because I think there's less that can go wrong for Keuchel than there is for Bassett, just because that ground ball rate is still off the charts. I mean, only so much damage can be done on a guy who's giving up that many ground balls, but Keuchel's not somebody I'm ever excited to draft. It's more like I clearly messed up starting pitcher, and at least this guy late will give me some quality innings,
Yeah, Keuchel kind of reinvented himself a little bit last year, too. He threw his sinker a lot less than ever before. As a result, the ground ball rate actually went down a little bit, but more cutters and more changeups than ever before. It really, really helped Keuchel suppress hard contact. So that I found interesting from last season for him. We're now into round 16 and 17. Shohei Ohtani at pick 184, who, of course, has starting pitcher and utility eligibility on CBS. Aaron Savale at pick 187. Tyler Mahle at 193. And Andrew Heaney at 197. Ohtani, Savale, Mahle, and Heaney. What do you think about this? Oh, Scott is excited. He is.
There's some good stuff here. There's these are the guys you pass over Bassett and Keuchel for. Yeah. And I would say that for virtually all of them. I mean, Ohtani, every report we get, and he's throwing harder, 97. I think the latest had him hitting 100. Mm-hmm. And, when we last saw him healthy, he looked like he was showing ace potential. Wasn't many starts, but obviously that was what he was billed as being. And now more time back from Tommy John surgery. It's worth the gamble again at this price, I think. Now, Savale and Mahle, I want to say Savale and Mahle because that's what it looks like, but Savale and Tyler Mahle, it's interesting how I think the fantasy baseball community as a whole probably likes Savale more as a sleeper. I don't really see the upside argument for Savale. It's a profile that looks a lot like Chris Bassett to me, actually. Not many ground balls, not great swing and miss ability. The xFIP and xERA were both very high last year. Tyler Mahle, though, I like Tyler Mahle a lot. We saw his K per 9, his swinging strike rate both jumped to elite levels last year because he finally developed a secondary pitch, a slider to go with that fastball. That was always been great. He's always just tried to live off that fastball, and it would kill him the third time through the order last year. Tyler Mahle, last year with that slider, not only did he see the strikeout numbers go up, third time through the order, hitters were 2 for 31 off him. 2019, hitters the third time through the order had an OPS over 1,000 against Tyler Mahle. And we saw him start to go deep into games toward the end of last year, some 6-inning starts, some 7-inning starts. The Reds can trust him to do that now because he has more than just the really good fastball. Tyler Mahle's a breakout candidate for me.
Yep, he's in my breakouts column as well. Very excited about Tyler Mahle. I actually went back about a month ago and I watched his last couple of starts. Specifically the start against the White Sox, 5 2/3, 1 earned run, 8 strikeouts. He made Jose Abreu, who won the MVP, look foolish quite a few times in that start. So Tyler Mahle, definitely interested in him there. And Aaron Savale, I liked him last year. I'm buying back in. It was his first 6 starts were great last year for Savale, and then he fell off the face of the earth. First 6 starts, 3.15 ERA. Final 6 starts for Savale, 6.62. I'm trusting the magical mound out there in Cleveland, and he throws like 5 different pitches at least 9% of the time. He has a deep repertoire, and I was reading this story just before we started, actually, from Cleveland.com. Savale told reporters last week that he refined his mechanics in the offseason, shortening his arm path and sharpening his changeup. Francona said the changes allow him to achieve better balance and to be on time where his arm is catching up with the rest of his body. Quote, his stuff is deceivingly really good, and anybody who knows him knows he doesn't back down from a challenge. He's not scared, Francona said. We think the kid's ceiling is maybe a little higher than people who don't know him. So I'm buying in. Chris, anything that you would like to add on Ohtani, Savale, Mahle, and Heaney? Because it is a very interesting group.
Yeah, I need to move Ohtani way back up my rankings. He might end up in my top 45 at starting pitcher at this pace. You know, if he's throwing 100 miles an hour, you look at his Baseball Savant page, and I mean, it's red all over from his 2018 season. The only thing that he wasn't basically elite at was control. And that probably won't be an issue for him if he's right. I think there were a couple of high walk starts, and then obviously, I think he got hurt, tried to pitch through it. I think Ohtani still has absolutely ace potential. There's going to be innings limits, and there's going to be limits to his utilization in a 6-man rotation, but that will be true of a lot of pitchers. I'm going to start getting excited about Shohei Ohtani again. And what the heck? I'll be that guy. Aaron Savale has the exact same strikeout rate in his career as Zach Plesac. He has a lower walk rate. He has a lower home run rate.
Yes.
He gets more ground balls.
Yes.
His ERA in the minors was 0.010 runs low or higher.
What have you done for me lately, Chris?
Right. That's
Savale
it.
stunk in 2020.
It's just
Zach
confirmation bias.
Was almost as good as Shane Bieber.
And
yes,
Zach Plesac didn't have the 6 starts where he pitched poorly because he only made 8 starts. If Aaron Savale's season ended after 8 starts, if Aaron Savale's season ended after 8 starts, he would have had pretty good numbers.
Yeah, his final numbers, he finished with a 4.74 ERA. Really,
but there were warning signs. I looked at Savale's numbers after those 6 starts, and I was saying, this does not look right to me. And then he fell. Well, however many starts it was. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I didn't like Savale even when he was going well.
I'm just saying, if as a mental exercise, we pretend history started before 2020, Aaron Savale and Zach Plesac look like the Spider-Man meme.
Okay.
And there was more hype around Savale last year this time than there was.
Well, yeah, because Plesac was really bad.
I don't know why that's a useful exercise. to say, I wish I was in a coma for all of 2020 and I just woke up thinking Savali and Plesac were exactly the same?
No, you're reading it entirely backwards. I didn't say ignore 2020. I said take their entire careers into account, including the minors and 2019 in the majors.
Doesn't seem like as useful an exercise to me either, but that fair enough.
All right.
I'm sure you're saying factual things.
Chris says bye, Savali. Scott, not so much. I do just want to quickly remote that Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, our new podcast. Yes.
Woo!
It's us, just in 5 minutes or less. You will hear us every single day. It's very similar to what Adam and the guys did with Fantasy Football Today in 5. Basically, whatever we talk about here on this podcast, more often than not, maybe we'll include some news items as well. We will turn into a 5-minute podcast as well. So make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever else you listen to podcasts. Again, that's Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and leave an Apple Podcast review. We appreciate it. And speaking of Apple Podcast reviews, throw one, a 5-star one for this podcast as well. Ask us a question. We will continue to do Saturday mailbags as long as there is demand for it. And I have a feeling there will be because we are getting a ton of questions. So email us fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. That's the letter I. And leave a 5-star Apple Podcast rating for this podcast and drop a question in the review. And we will answer it on our Saturday mailbag. If you're watching on the video side, don't go anywhere. If you're listening to the podcast, we're going to take a quick break. But when we return, we'll be back with more ADP here on Fantasy Baseball Today. All right, so now we move into pick 200 and beyond. Jose Urquidy at 200 of the Houston Astros. Zach Eflin with the Phillies at pick 201. Marcus Stroman returns to the New York Mets at pick 202. Jameson Taillon now with the Yankees at pick 204. And Eduardo Rodriguez, who missed the entire 2020 season with COVID complications. He actually wound up with, I believe it was a heart issue as a result of it. He's going at pick 205. So between Urquidy, Eflin, Stroman, Taillon, and Eduardo Rodriguez, your favorite or favorites here, Scott?
Taillon, pretty easily. He's, the Pirates had that trio of elite pitching prospects that included Garrett Cole and Tyler Glasnow, and Taillon was the third one. The first two underwhelmed in Pittsburgh. They left Pittsburgh. They changed their arsenals, less sinker focus, more four-seamer and breaking ball, and they became studs, or at least borderline stud in Glasnow's case. And Taillon, we're hopeful the same thing happens to him, and it sounds like he's implementing those same changes, de-emphasizing the sinker, going with more of a four-seamer breaking ball approach, should up his strikeout potential. There is the added complication for Taillon. He's coming off his second Tommy John surgery, and that's always a challenge. But reports out of Yankees camp are good, and I think the price is right.
Yep. Jameson Taillon, if you remember back in entering the 2019 season, his ADP was inside the top 70. His ADP was actually 65. So Taillon is a pitcher that we were excited about. I remember it was the season before in 2018 where he started using that slider more. He's talked about changing up his mechanics as well to help keep his arm and his elbow in particular healthy. So we'll see. Definitely someone to watch. I believe today, when you're hearing this, Monday, March 1st, Jameson Taillon will make his Yankees debut in spring training. So definitely something to pay attention to there. Chris, between Urquidy, Eflin, Stroman, Taillon, Erod, anything that you'd like to add? I know Eno Saris over at The Athletic absolutely loves Jose Urquidy, and we haven't really talked much about him. So,
yeah, that definitely makes me more interested in him. According to Eno's stuff and control metrics, Jose Urquidy is a real standout. According to those two, it's not a guarantee. He does give up a lot of fly balls. He always has. But his minor league track record suggests that there's more strikeout potential than he's shown so far. So I think Jose Urquidy in this range is a perfectly fine gamble. I think Marcus Stroman is... I don't see why you would rather have Dallas Keuchel than Marcus Stroman at this point. I think they're probably going to be very similar pitchers. So give me the one that's going a little later. And Erod, I think, is better, assuming he's able to make it through the season without complications, and he's been medically cleared. So you assume that, it should be okay. I think 200th overall is a really good draft price for him. He's got a 3.81 ERA between 2018 and 2019. There are always some control issues. There are always some workload issues. He doesn't necessarily pitch super deep into games all that consistently, but 378 FIP to back that up. Whip's not going to be great, but at this point in the draft, if you can get a guy who will strike out, almost 10 per 9 with a high 3s ERA, that's a pretty good value.
I have to ask, none of us are buying Eflin and his 10.7 K per 9 last year, right? Because it certainly stands out when you're just sorting by that leaderboard.
He is another guy who does really well by the stuff and command profile metrics.
I like him.
You like Eflin? Zach Eflin?
I don't love him, but I like him. I think the 10.68 K per 9 from last year is fluky based on the swinging strike rate. Yes, his swinging strike rate was up, but it's not like it was awesome or anything. He made some changes to the pitch mix. He uses curveball more than ever before, threw it about 13% of the time. But all of his underlying metrics really lined up with Zach Eflin's numbers as well. I mean, 3.23 xFIP, 3.50 Sierra. It's pretty interesting. So,
yeah. I mean, they're buying, just by virtue of how those stats are calculated, they're taking the 10.7 K per 9 at face value. And I'm just not. I just don't think the swinging strike rate, I think, was not that different for Zach Eflin last year, right, than in previous years.
Yeah, it was better than it was in 2019, but it was this basically exactly where it was at back in 2018. I think it could be maybe a strikeout per inning, high 3s ERA, which is, what you basically just said about Eduardo Rodriguez. So maybe they're not dissimilar, but Eflin has my attention a little bit in this range. The next group of 5, Christian Javier going at pick 206, Tony Gonsolin at pick 212, Zach Davies at 215, Chris Sale at 219, and Nate Pearson at pick 220. Scott, this group is really all over the place. Christian Javier's numbers were so weird from last year. His minor league track record is great, but his numbers last year were weird. Tony Gonsolin, we don't know if he has a job, but he is someone that if I can handcuff him with a Dodgers pitcher, which is something like we've never said before in fantasy baseball, I think I would look into doing it because I think the upside is real for Tony Gonsolin.
I love drafting Gonsolin, especially in categories leagues. Like he seems to be falling a lot more than Dustin May, at least in my experience, with the likelihood neither is in the rotation to begin the season. But also, like, I'm still betting on both of them making 15 to 20 starts this year and likely performing well out of the bullpen in between then. So in categories league especially, they're probably still going to be somebody you want in your lineup and have stretches where they're great. So I think it's a good time to buy on both, especially Gonsolin, who has a superior strikeout ability. I do think Christian Javier, I've called Dylan Moore the most interesting player in fantasy this year. I think Javier might be the most interesting pitcher because nothing about his stat line really makes sense. And yet the minor league track record is very strong. Like he's a guy who basically just throws a fastball and slider and the fastball a ton, but it's like multiple different variations of the same fastball. And it just seems to really prevent hitters from squaring up the ball. You look at, he had a 4.86 xFIP last year, Javier, compared to that 3.48 ERA, less than a strikeout per inning, fly ball pitcher. So a lot of home runs. I could see things going very, very wrong for Javier this year, but fortunately, I think it's already baked into the cost. I don't think anybody's paying face value for his numbers the way I feared they would coming into draft prep season.
Zach Davies is really boring, but he was really good last year. 2.73 ERA, a 1.07 WHIP. The underlying numbers don't necessarily buy it, but he made real changes to his pitch mix. Zach Davies did last season. He threw his fastball, which is not a good fastball. It's 88 miles per hour. He threw it less than ever before. He used his cutter and his changeup more than ever. So just pay attention in a points league. I think Zach Davies could be serviceable as the right in the right streaming context in the National League Central as a 2-star pitcher. He's better in a points league. Chris, when it comes to Chris Sale, he had Tommy John surgery last year back in March, and I think we're expecting him maybe in June or July. Is this enough of a discount where you'd be looking to stash him? I think in a keeper league where you can kind of keep him this year and kind of have him for that round value the next year, I'd be very interested in stashing someone like Chris Sale.
Yeah, I mean, he is, he'll be a 32-year-old, 33-year-old by the time we get to 2022, coming off Tommy John surgery. And, the velocity was down in 2019 and it was just a weird season. But yeah, I think drafting him, with the hope that you get something out of him in the second half of the season makes a lot of sense. I just don't know why you would do that 70 picks ahead of where Luis Severino tends to go. I don't know why you would do it. I don't know why you would draft Noah Syndergaard 40 picks ahead of where Luis Severino.
Right. I agree. I feel
understand.
like Severino should be the first of the three the big name Tommy John recoverers. He should be the first one taken, and he's the last for some reason.
Yeah. So Justin Verlander's way later, but he's probably not going to pitch much.
Yeah. And I was just, Verlander's not going to be back this year, but between Syndergaard, Sale, and Severino, feels like Severino should be the first off the board.
Yeah. Severino. And I think Chris Sale will probably be better than Severino and especially Syndergaard, but I'm not sure. That was a weird 2019 was a weird season, and he's had a lot of elbow issues over the last couple of seasons, and maybe it's starting to catch up to him. So I would rather have Severino than Sale for 2020 and probably 2021 because he's younger. And then I'll just point out, just to go back to Gonsolin, you could draft Trevor Bauer in the 2nd, Kershaw in the 3rd, Arias in the 10th, Dustin May in the 14th, David Price in the 15th, Tony Gonsolin in the 18th. You're probably going to get like a 3 ERA, 10K per 9, and a 1 whip out of those guys over, 700 innings? Like I think this is a viable strategy pretty much every year because I think Walker Buehler's kind of the exception where I just think he's being overvalued. But as a whole, the Dodgers pitchers have more value if you have them all on your roster than any individual one may have. It's, you might not want to have both Dustin May or Tony Gonsolin on your team at the same time, but it's a viable strategy, especially if you've got, more than 4 or 5 bench spots, because they all, outside of Bauer and Kershaw, they all cost so little.
Scott is smiling. I think that means that it's time to move on.
That's fine.
I think he's just
he makes this point every year, and that's fine. Let's move on.
I will just anything you want to add on Nate Pearson, Scott. I know you were excited about him last year, but he had a flexor strain in his right elbow, which he wasn't really pitching good outside of that anyway.
Pearson, he wasn't. Now, he did come back in the playoffs, strike out 5 in 2 innings. I think all 5 batters he faced, he faced 6 batters, I guess, but 5 of the 6 batters he faced, obviously there's upside there. I'm not as excited to draft him this year because now I know you have to wait through growing pains with him. When before, when he's fresh, you don't necessarily know how it's going to go. He could come up and dominate right away. That's not how it went for Nate Pearson. There's no problem taking him at the range he's going. I'm just not as enthusiastic about it as I was this time last year.
Just outside the top 220 picks, we see Sean Manaea at pick 224, Michael Pineda at 227, John Means Business at 234, Nathan Eovaldi at 238, and Kwang Hyun Kim at 239. Chris, who is your favorite from this group? Manaea, Pineda, Means, Eovaldi, and Kim. You can say nobody.
I guess I like Means, Pineda, and Eovaldi kind of all similarly. So any one of those 3 I think are perfectly fine in the, we're talking about the 17th or 18th round range. I have no problem with them. I don't quite get Sean Manaea being up here. There are still a lot of pitchers with upside going after him, and he pretty much proved last season that what he did at the end of 2019 wasn't real.
I feel like I have to get my John Means spiel again for the pitcher preview, right? Or did I already talk about him in breakouts.
I think
I already talked about him.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you talked about him as a breakout. I mean, if you want
to go listen to Starting Pitchers Part 1, you'll hear how much I like John Means. But you see how late he's going. I mean, he's practically free at this point. Doesn't seem like there's much downside to taking a shot on the upside. I also like the value of Michael Pineda, who you talked about as your sleeper and Starting Pitchers, the Starting Pitchers Part 1, Frank. He's a nice high floor play this late, who is going to give you innings, an okay strikeout total, good whip, okay ERA. Like, he's going to be fine. He's going to be a fine option for your pitching staff here. But if you're shooting for upside, Means is the way I'd go.
I think people have fatigue when it comes to Michael Pineda and Nathan Eovaldi, but they've both been pretty good. Pineda, 31 starts since 2019. He's allowed 3 earned runs or less in 26 of those. So by definition, he is a quality pitcher. And Nate Eovaldi last year just had the highest strikeout rate and lowest walk rate of his career. So maybe you don't buy it in the shortened season, but at 22.6% K- walk percentage, that would have ranked top 12 among qualified starting pitchers.
And he was hitting 100 miles per hour today. He came out firing to start spring training, Nathan Eovaldi. 5
different pitches, deep arsenal. He was pretty good last year. I like Nate Eovaldi in this range. We are now into round 21 and beyond. Noah Syndergaard, who spoke a little bit about, at pick 244. Eliezer Hernandez at 247. Ryan Yarbrough at 253. Domingo Germán at 262. And Robbie Ray at 264.
Starting to get excited about Eliezer Hernandez, who I've been excited about in the past. Last year, he only ended up making 6 starts. The season was ended by injury, but 11.9 K per 9 in those 6 starts. He gets a lot of whiffs on his slider. Earlier in his career, unless this is just bad data, he used to throw a changeup a decent amount too and get a good whiff rate with it as well, and then just kind of shied away from it, became a 2-pitch pitcher. He had an okay whiff rate on the changeup, I guess. He's working to develop the changeup again. He's going to try to be a 3-pitch pitcher with the explicit goal of pitching deeper into games. So if he can take the strikeout potential he showed last year, and he showed it in his minor league career, guy with very good minor league numbers, Eliezer Hernandez is a nice little sleeper too, especially for as late as he's going.
Yeah, I'm not just saying this because Chris is here. I actually like all the Marlins pitchers. It's a good park to pitch in, and they've all shown a decent amount of upside as well. So between Alcantara, Pablo Lopez, Eliezer Hernandez, Sixto Sanchez, Trevor Rogers, not so much, but those.
I like Trevor Rogers.
Oh, Chris.
And that's not just like a Marlins thing.
Yeah.
I like Trevor Rogers.
A lot of people seem to like Trevor Rogers. Yeah, I mean, I think he has underrated strikeout ability too.
It's basically just a strikeout upside play. And Eliezer Hernandez, like, I think if you want 5.5 strikeouts and 4.5 innings per start, I think he can probably give you that.
If he gets that 3rd pitch, maybe he can have some 6-inning starts.
It can happen, but I think either way this season, like, that's not really a knock on him. I think he's not going to pitch deep into games, but I think he'll be pretty good when he does.
I would say the same thing about Ryan Yarbrough at pick 253. I think he's pretty good when he actually does pitch. Last year, among starting pitchers with at least 50 innings pitched, Ryan Yarbrough had a 40% O swing that was tied for first with Kenta Maeda. He had a 13.3% swinging strike rate that would have ranked 17th, and a 25% hard contact rate that would have been 6th best among starting pitchers. So Ryan Yarbrough, I think, is interesting as well. Scott, anything to see here with Robbie Ray at this point, or pass?
No, let's move on. Not much hope left.
All right, let's get into rounds 23 and beyond. Madison Bumgarner at pick 265. Casey Mize at pick 273. Matthew Boyd at 275. Davey Garcia at 278. Luis Severino at 282. And Adam Wainwright at pick 289. Bumgarner, Mize, Boyd, Davey Garcia, Severino, Wainwright. This is quite the mix of young potential and old yuck. What the heck are we doing? Who do you guys like from this group?
I did like Davey Garcia, but when I thought he had a rotation spot for the Yankees, and maybe he still will, but it seems like it's going to be either him or Domingo Germán, and it seems like Germán has the leg up in that. So we'll see. But I was impressed by how much control Garcia exhibited upon reaching the major, like elite strike percentage, not strikeout, but strike percentage for a guy who's shown huge strikeout potential in the minors. So, efficient. He was working deep into games for the Yankees, and I think it'll be a big winner for them whenever he does get his chance.
And would just love to watch a guy who's 5'9" and gets strikeouts like he does. Like that's a fun profile. I'm a little surprised Adam Wainwright is like what's the difference between Adam Wainwright and like Chris Bassett? I know Adam Wainwright's really old, but like he's coming off a 3.05 ERA. He was really good last season. Obviously, I don't think he's going to do that again, but
career best swinging strike rate for Adam Wainwright last year. How about that?
I think he's gonna be fine. Like I don't think you're ever gonna be super excited about Adam Wainwright, but you probably won't like hate him. I think he'll probably put up a low 4s ERA. And
he's somebody I find I'm drafting in like really deep leagues. Yeah. Adam Wainwright, just because nobody wants. I'm surprised his ADP is this high, frankly, because I've never seen anybody draft him but me.
Feels like he goes later. And Casey Mize, I will like if everything goes right. His profile is kind of like a diet Max Scherzer. I don't think he will be that good, although we are talking about one of the most hyped pitching prospects in baseball over the last couple of seasons. But that power pitcher profile, I think he could be really good. I think all three of those Tigers prospects, Matt Manning, Tariq Skubal, and Casey Mize, are great late round reserve round guys.
Why is Mize going this high? Why is he the 82nd pitcher drafted and Tariq Skubal's 113th? Isn't Skubal looked better last year? Skubal seems to have the leg up in a rotation battle. I'm not really sure what that's all about. I'd much rather have Skubal. I think the ADP is getting pretty weird in this range, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, because when you're looking at Fantasy Pros, Tariq Skubal's actual average of the three, he doesn't have a listed ADP on ESPN or Yahoo, but his average on the sites that he does have an ADP is 307. And so it is like he's going 113th among pitchers, but it's, at this point, ADP doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think we should just pick out interesting pitchers to talk about here, because you're right. It doesn't really matter. James Paxton is the 300th player off the board on average. I feel like that's going up, right?
That's another one where, where's he actually? What's his actual? Yeah, this is just it's all weird at this point, because he's actually being drafted 226th. It's another one where it's just
you're saying some sites, they don't have ADP data for him at all, so that drags down the average.
That drags
ADP.
it down.
Yeah. Really, it looks like Paxton's going between 200th and 250th, which is about where,
which is
like
fine.
Eliezer Hernandez, Nathan Eovaldi were going.
Yeah. It seems fine. I'm neither excited nor like mad about that 80.
But it's kind of another Corey Kluber like gamble, except maybe the upside isn't quite as high for Paxton.
Yeah. I will just bring up Jordan Montgomery with the Yankees too. We spoke about Davy Garcia and Domingo Germán a little bit. I don't know that Jordan Montgomery for sure has a spot in the rotation. Apologies, but his surface numbers were not good last year. 5.11 ERA for Montgomery, but a 12.9% swinging strike rate, over a strikeout per inning, and under 2 walks per 9. Those are pretty good skill numbers for Jordan Montgomery.
I like Brady Singer at his cost too. I think there's a pretty high floor there. He actually really just focused on 2 pitches down the stretch last year because he was able to tunnel them well, which means they looked similar coming out of the hand, and his production went way up when he did that. Singer did. I don't think there's a high ceiling there, but I think there is a high floor. I think he'll pitch pretty deep into games with an at least acceptable strikeout rate.
Do we want to just go like back and forth on just like naming interesting pitchers for the last like 3 or 4 minutes?
Yeah, go ahead. Who you got, Chris?
Carlos Martinez. He's like way off radars this season. His ADP is 372. I know the last 2 seasons have kind of been lost for him, but we are talking about a guy who was consistently being drafted as a top 15, top 20 starting pitcher not that long ago. And shockingly, he's kind of the anti-Carlos Carrasco. He's only 29. I kind of was just assumed he was the same age as Carlos Carrasco or something similar. So, Carlos Martinez, there's a chance he finds it. So, I don't want people to literally forget about him.
I will bring up Dane Dunning, who went to the Texas Rangers
Love your Rangers.
Yeah, of course. What? Don't make me go get the hat. But yeah, Dane Dunning came over in the Lance Lynn trade, and he was pretty good last year. 3.97 ERA, 1.12 WHIP, and his first 3 starts in particular, the swinging strike rate was very high, 17.5% when he was using his slider more. Again, this is Dane Dunning, and then that dropped over the final 4 starts. And Scott, I remember we kind of we were skeptical, wondering, like, did they tell him to pitch to contact more because he stopped using his slider as much? So I think if Dane Dunning uses that pitch, he can get a good amount of strikeouts, maybe a strikeout per inning. So I'm pretty interested in Dane Dunning.
I do want to go into more detail on Skubal because he's another. I guess it's kind of like I was saying for Tyler Mahle early, a guy with a great fastball. His minor league numbers are ridiculous, just like Malle's were excellent too. Somebody who, if he develops his secondary arsenal, you could see him taking off. He worked out with Driveline Baseball this offseason. Tariq Skubal did, and he worked to develop a splitter that is earning some rave reviews in Tigers camp. So that might be the pitch that puts Skubal over the top, and obviously very low cost here.
Chris, you're up.
Brad Keller. He is only 25 years old, which frankly shocked me. He was someone who I just assumed he was 27 or 28 when he came up.
Yeah.
But has been weirdly effective. He has a 3.50 ERA for his career. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, and that's always going to limit the fantasy appeal. But he's had a better than average ERA in each of his 3 major league seasons. He has been, again, this is another guy very good at limiting hard contact so far in his career. And there's a quote from him where he basically said, "They forced me to throw my changeup a few times last season, and I didn't really have the feel for it. But then I looked and saw the results were pretty good, and he only threw 17 of them, so it's a very small sample size. But that could be something that he feels more confident in this season. He's already talking about, and could make him a better pitcher. He's had some, he's been less effective against lefties than righties, and if he can, be a little more effective with both, I think Brad Keller can be a decent fantasy option. Sorry, Scott.
I got so many more pitchers to talk about.
Go ahead, Scott.
All right, so so I haven't mentioned Griffin Canning, who I think I mentioned in part 1 as my sleeper pitcher. Once he got comfortable throwing that slider again, he had developed a curveball too, and the swinging strikes, the strikeouts went way up toward the end of the season. Drew Smyly has a rotation spot for the Braves. Among pitchers with 5 or more starts last year, he actually had the highest K per 9 rate. It was better than Shane Bieber's. Very small sample, but his velocity was up by like 2 to 3 miles per hour last year. And so, we'll see if he can sustain that over an extended stretch, but doesn't cost much, obviously. There are a lot of prospects we could get into that tend to go late in drafts, like Mackenzie Gore, Spencer Howard, Mitch Keller, ex-prospect. They all still have a chance of breaking through, obviously, but one who doesn't get as much attention is Adbert Alzolay.
Yes.
And now he's fighting for a rotation spot for the Cubs because they added so many low-end guys toward the end of the offseason. But he's gonna get his chance sooner than later. And he added a slider last year that became his best swing and miss pitch. And the little bit he pitched for the Cubs down the stretch last year, he was racking up strikeouts in a way we didn't think he could. So Alzolay is somebody who could see his value skyrocket this year.
Mitch Keller. I know I was high on Mitch Keller last year, and that didn't go well. He had more walks than strikeouts, but he was clearly not healthy early on, and I'm not sure he was ever really right. His velocity was down 92, 93 miles per hour. His first couple of starts, he missed a month and a half with an oblique strain, came back and just didn't have his control. So I think, I'll kind of give him a pass. There's still potential there. Control had never really been an issue for him. So Mitch Keller, I like him. And I find myself drafting Garrett Richards late. in a few places. He's with Boston, and he's always usually pretty effective.
Yep. Again, that is Garrett Richards, who is now with the Boston Red Sox. I will mention TJ Antone, who is someone I wrote about on the site. He's in my Sleepers 2.0 article, and he's in a position battle for the SP5 role with the Cincinnati Reds, along with Michael Lorenzen and Jose De Leon. But Antone was really good last year, 2.80 ERA, 1.02 whip, and he's part of like the Cincinnati revolution with the Cincinnati Reds, where like his fastball spin rate was in the 98th percentile, his curve spin rate was in the 95th percentile, 13% swinging strike rate. Again, the name is TJ Antone. If he doesn't win a rotation spot, he might compete for their closer job. So I'm interested in taking shots on him very late in drafts. And the other name I'll mention is Justice Sheffield, who used to have some prospect pedigree. I think he has 2+ pitches in the slider and the changeup. The swinging strike rate came down last year for him, but he started throwing the sinker last season, pitched to contact a little bit more. It helped him get a lot of ground balls. But I think based on how good that slider and changeup is, I think the swinging strikes can make a bit of a bounce back here for Justice Sheffield. Anyone else?
I want to mention Carlos Rodon.
Oh, sorry.
I'll keep an eye on Carlos Rodon and Alex Wood. He's one of the rare Sparps who, pitching in San Francisco, it's possible he could be a useful head-to-head points league guy.
The Giants made Gausman good last year too, and I mean they've been doing well with starting pitchers. So
yeah, I've heard some hype about Anthony Desclafani's changeup. They're definitely guys to keep an eye on. But one who I think is going to be drafted in a fair number of leagues and was mentioned in the chat here, Tanner
Houck.
Tanner Houck. Thank you. I always lose confidence when I get to say his last name. Tanner Houck of the Red Sox. I put him 100th in my top 100 prospects because I'm just intrigued enough that I don't want people to forget about him. Slider earned a 65 grade from Baseball America this year. That means it's an elite pitch. He throws it about 35% of the time. Throwing a really good pitch a lot has been a great formula for a lot of pitchers in this league who didn't look like they'd be stars, and then they broke through and became much more than we thought they'd be. Houck allowed 6 hits in 17 innings in his 3 starts in the majors last year, struck out 21. Not saying I'm super excited about him. I like somebody like Adbert Alzolay more, but I'm saying there's a chance for Tanner Houck, and we shouldn't forget about him.
So you're saying there's a chance for one,
exactly.
Tanner Houck with the Boston Red Sox. If you're still listening this late in the podcast and you're wondering how much to pay for these starting pitchers in a salary cap draft, here are Scott's values for the different tier of pitchers. And this is assuming a 12-team salary cap draft, standard $260 budget. Jacob deGrom, Shane Bieber, and Garrett Cole up at the top between $36 and $38. Aaron Nola, Yu Darvish, and Bauer between $31 and $33. Jack Flaherty and Walker Buehler at $25. Steven Strasburg and Zach Plesac at $20. Jose Berrios and Chris Paddock at $15. Charlie Morton and Lance McCullers in the $9 to $10 range. David Price and James Paxton for around $5. And then Dane Dunning and Nate Pearson for $1. $1 Buck Bash. All right. I think we did it. That was a lot of pitchers in a lot of time. But tomorrow we will have relief pitchers, I hope. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball Today. Make sure to subscribe to Fantasy Baseball Today and 5 as well. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.